Hello everyone! Today I want to show you how I run my Magicka Dragonknight in some of my trial groups. Um, it's quite an interesting build because it's not the typical Magicka Dragonknight build. It focuses more around buffing the whole group's damage. So my personal damage is reduced by a little bit from what I would get from using the standard DPS sets that people use in endgame content. However, I do buff the whole group's damage, and also still hitting around 70k myself with that setup. So it's not like I'm completely losing out. I'm still doing a fairly decent amount of damage that is good enough for veteran trials and veteran content, while buffing the whole group's damage. Later on, after I've shown you this setup though, I will go into other gear that you can use and hint towards a couple other rotations in case you wanted to know how to get more single target DPS and not buff your group. So let's quickly put potion on. Ooh, it's laggy, nice. I'm sitting on around 32, almost 33k max Magicka, over 16k health, got 12k max stamina. Our Magicka recovery is 1600, which is pretty nice. Spell damage is 2800, but that goes up with our passives and our skills once we're in combat. And then we've got 63.5% critical hit chance, which is very nice as well. Magicka, we've got 64 points straight into Magicka, nothing in here in health or stamina. I'm a stage for Vampire right now for the extra Magicka recovery. However, you can also run this when you're not a Vampire. It'll still work quite fine. And then with the next patch, we'll see once the completely new Vampire skill line is out, if that even still makes sense anymore to have it on a DPS character because of the increased cost of all the skills. Probably not, but we'll see what they do with it and when it's actually live. For a food slash drink, we're using Magicka recovery, Magicka and health. The Witch Mother's Potent Brew. This is important for the extra 278 max Magicka recovery, so we get to the 1600, and we have an easier time sustaining everything that we're doing. And for a Mundustone on this build particularly, I'm using the Thief. If you want to go with full-on single target damage, you'd use the Shadow for it. However, with the sets and rotation I'm playing on this particular build, the Thief is better to push us over the 60% here when our potion is active, and make sure that we crit a lot. As I just shown you, for potions we are running the spell power pods. Major sorcery increasing spell damage, major prophecy increasing critical rating, and major intellect increasing our Magicka recovery. We always have those up to get all these buffs. We do get prophecy and stuff from a couple of the skills we have, so if you can't afford these, it's not completely bad. You can also just run Essence of Magicka for the intellect and extra Magicka. However, if you're going into actual endgame sort of content, veteran trials, I'd advise you to bring these anyway, just to make sure you always have these 3 buffs active. Okay, we'll go right into the skills. First up from the Ardent Flame skill line is Molten Whip. First thing you unlock starts out as Lava Whip. This deals flame damage, and if you strike an enemy that is immobilized or stunned, you set them off balance, which plays well with our champion points, so you do more damage to off balanced enemies. Plus, while this is slotted, whenever you activate a different Ardent Flame ability, you gain a stack of Seething Fury, which increases the damage of your next Molten Whip by 33%. This is how you get the backflip whip. I'll quickly show you that. This is how the whip usually looks. You can see it already set the enemy on fire. And if you use another ability from the Ardent Flame skill line, say this, you can see next to my food buff above my health bar that red face. And now we have 3 stacks of it, so the next whip will be the big backflip whip doing more damage. So in our rotation, I've got that covered, that we're always having the buff of 3 up when we do our first whip, to always have it be the strong backflip whip. Next up, as you've already seen, is Harness Magicka. This comes from the Mage's Guild skill line, and this is basically your damage shield. It absorbs up to 8k damage for 6 seconds. Plus, when the shield is active and it absorbs damage, you restore Magicka. So this is nice for our sustain and our protection. Looks like this. I'd always advise you to run a shield unless you're with a very experienced trial group and you really trust the healers that they got your back covered. Other than that, for all sorts of content, it's always good to stick a shield on. Next up is Degeneration. This comes from the Mage's Guild skill line. Yes, you'll have to level Mage's Guild for this build, unfortunately. It's necessary. It starts out as Entropy, and it's pretty much a damage over time ability. For 12 seconds, you will deal 14k over 14k magic damage, and then while it's active, you also gain Major Sorcery, increasing your spell damage, which we also get from the potions, but if you're running dungeons and you don't want to waste all your expensive pots, it's nice to have this on the bar and get the buff anyway. Then next up, again from the Ardent Flame skill line, is Burning Embers. Second thing you unlock starts as Searing Strike, morphed to Burning Embers, and this deals flame damage, an initial flame damage of over 4k, and then around 14k over the next 14 seconds. It also heals you for the total damage inflicted when the effect ends, and then enemies hit by it initially are afflicted with the burning status effect. So we put enemies on fire with this, as you can see, and then it deals flame damage over time. Another nice thing you can do with this is if your health is dropping low in dungeon content or so, it heals you when the effect ends. So if you've got that on there, and then you take damage and your health is going down, you just do it again, so the first one ends sooner, and you heal for the portion of damage that was inflicted until you hit it the second time. So this is a nice trick if you need some health back quick. And then from the Mage's Guild skill line, again, we've got Scalding Rune. This starts out as Fiery Rune. You can morph it to Scalding Rune, and what this does is it puts a rune on the ground which, when triggered, blasts an area of effect damage of 8k flame damage, and then an additional 8k flame damage over the next 14 seconds. It looks like this, putting down that rune, and when it triggers, it deals flame damage over time as well. And then also from the Mage's Guild skill line is Ice Comet. That's the Meteomorph, the ultimate ability. We're not actually using this ever. It would deal frost damage in area of effect and stunning enemies, reducing movement speed. However, this is just there for the passives really on the front bar. This is not the ultimate we're actively using. So on the back bar we got Barb Trap. This comes from the Fighter's Guild skill line, and this deals physical damage over time, plus what we're actually using it for is the Minor Force, increasing our critical damage by 10%. So you put this down, and then you can see that little fist icon coming up, and that's the Minor Force that we've got now, increasing all of our critical damage by 10% until it runs out, which is nice because we got over 60% crit chance. So this will push our damage in the rotation quite a bit. And then we've got Flames of Oblivion, which is the last thing you get from the Ardent Flame skill line. This is the Morph of Inferno, and what this does is it puts an aura around yourself, and it launches a fireball at enemies every 5 seconds, dealing 6k flame damage. Plus, also while slotted, you gain Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, increasing your spell and critical rating. So we've got Major Prophecy on the back bar from Flames of Oblivion, and we've also got Major Sorcery on the front bar from Degeneration. However, all of this is in our spell power pots. This is why I said that those would be the preferred pots for running actual trial content. Flames of Oblivion looks like this. Just putting this aura around yourself, and then it will, as soon as you attack something, launch a fireball at the target every so often. Like this. The other thing that you just saw was the monster set. Never mind that for now. Okay, next up we've got Molten Whip again on the back bar. We're not actually using this skill on the back bar, but it needs to be on the bar, because while slotted, whenever we activate a different Ardent Flame ability, you gain a stack of Seething Fury. So it needs to be on the back bar as well, just to be slotted, so we gain these stacks of Seething Fury, and we can always do the cool backflip whip when we go to our front bar. The next thing we've got is Engulfing Flames. This is also from the Ardent Flame skill line. Starts out as Fiery Breath, morph it to Engulfing Flames, and what this does is blasts fire at the enemy in front of you, dealing almost 6k flame damage and an additional 10k flame damage over 14 seconds. Affected enemies take more damage from all flame damage attacks based on your offensive stats, with a maximum of 10% bonus damage taken. So you can see here now my current value is 7% because I think it scales off of your spell damage mostly. However, our spell damage will go up, first of all, by gaining these stacks of Seething Fury, increasing them for 5 seconds, and we'll always have these up most of the time, plus by one of our sets, which will give us an extra around 500 spell damage. So the 7% that you can see here in the tooltip will be increased in our actual rotation when we're in content. And then we've got Elemental Blockade from the Destruction Staff skill line. I've opted for this morph because this patch I was playing it quite a bit with Elf Pain on, and then it was nicer to just have the longer duration morph. You can use the Unstable Wall of Elements morph if you want to. You'll have to be a bit quicker and shorten your front bar rotation by maybe 1 or 2 skills. However, it will deal more damage with the explosion, but the actual difference isn't the end of the world. So if you want to play it safe and just have the blockade down at all times and not lose uptime on it, just go with the Elemental Blockade. And if you already know what you're doing and you're pretty good with the rotations, you can also go for the Unstable Wall and just be quick enough to not lose a lot of uptime on it. This is pretty much just an AoE effect of flame damage. It looks like this. Putting down the field of fire and everything inside of it will take more damage. And then finally our ultimate, the Standard of Might. This will call a battle standard, dealing flame damage every 1 second for 20 seconds. And applying Major Defile to people, enemies, reducing their healing received and health recovery, and standing in the area also increases your damage done and reduces your damage taken by 15%. Plus it also gives a synergy for allies to deal flame damage for them and immobilizing enemies. So this is very important because this ups all of our damage. I'm gonna do a couple light attacks here to get some ultimate. And you want to call this when you've already done your area of effect damage thingies. So in your rotation on the back bar, I'd usually opt to do it last, because first I want to have Engulfing Flames up, I want to have my Flames of Oblivion up, and most of all I want to have my Blockade up. And then I call this down, and all the damage I'm already doing is now increased. Plus my damage taken is reduced. And you want to obviously stay inside of that circle because that's where you get that damage buff. That flamey circle you can see here. Okay, so much for the skills and how they work. Now let's have a look at some very important passives. You can't skip this if you already know Dragon Knight's in and out. However, this is quite important. Most of our abilities we're utilizing, everything except for Unrelenting Grip really, is from the Ardent Flame skill line. We're using all of the skills except for Unrelenting Grips, what I'm trying to say. So Combustion is very important because this increases the damage of your burning and poison status effects by 50%. When you apply burning to an enemy, you restore 500 magicka and poison 500 stamina. So we apply burning to enemies a whole lot, and that means we'll restore a whole lot of magicka from that. This is very important for our resource management. Then Warmth, when you deal direct damage with an Ardent Flame ability, you reduce the enemy's movement speed. That's not too important, however it's a nice buff to have, especially in dungeons, because we do a lot of direct damage, mostly with our Molten Whip. Searing Heat increases the damage over time of your Fiery Breath, Searing Strike, and Dragon Knight standard abilities. We are using all of these, so you definitely want to use that to get the duration up a little bit. And then World and Ruin increases the damage of your flame area of effect abilities by 6%, and the poison reduces the cost of your poison stamina abilities, but that's not too important for us. So you definitely want to get that as well, because it increases the damage down of all of our flame area of effect abilities, which we're using a lot as well. Draconic Power increases the amount of damage you can block. That's always nice for trials and dungeons alike. Then while the Draconic Power ability's active, your healing received is increased. That's not too important really. for us. Increases your health recovery, that's also not too important for us because we're not using any of these abilities on the build. But this is important, increases our spell resistance randomly by 3k. More resistances is always very nice. Now, you could probably put that thing on, coagulating blood, the dragon blood morph anyway for the Magickas. This would be a self-heal for up to 7k. However, you don't really need that in most content, I figured. If you're running dungeons with a completely random group and you don't have a healer, it might be a good idea to put it on your bar somewhere. Maybe just here on the back bar instead of the whip. You won't get the backflip whip then, or the searing strike, but it's better than dying anyway. But other than that, you probably won't need that. Your shield will be enough, plus you can heal yourself with burning embers, should be fine. So, yep. So much for these passives. And then here we've got in the Earth and Heart skill line, Eternal Mountain increases the duration of your Earth and Up abilities by 20%. I definitely get that, because if you are not running the complete dot build, you will probably run Eruption. And if you are in puck groups, in dungeons and veteran dungeons with no healers and a crappy group to begin with, you might want to use Magma Shell, for example, to protect yourself. Sometimes it's a good thing to have on the front bar if you can't trust your healers or there aren't any. So definitely get that passive as well, mainly for the Eruption if you have to use that. Then Battle Roar, when you cast an ultimate ability you restore Magicka, that's very nice, definitely get that. Mountain's Blessing, when you cast an Earth and Heart ability, you and your group gain minor brutality for 20 seconds. That can be nice, as I said. Again, if you're using Eruption and you've got staminas in your group, you can give them a bit of a boost, so definitely get that as well. And then Helping Hands, when you cast a non-stamina Earth and Heart ability, you restore stamina. That's not really necessary, to be honest. However, if you're not running a certain set that I'll get into later, you get free stamina back for casting Eruption then, so might as well get it. Get all of the Destruction Staff ones, obviously. Get all of the Light Armor ones, obviously. From the Medium Armor, you only need the first 3 and the last one, because this one only applies when you wear 5 or more pieces of Medium Armor, which we are not. And from the Heavy Armor one, only the first 3 for extra resistances and max health. Vampire, as I said, if you are one, get Supernatural Recovery, Undeath, and Unnatural Resistance. If you're not one, you don't need to worry about that. Then Fighter's Guild, I'd actually definitely get this one because it reduces the cost of your Beast Trap by 15%. And then you can also get these, just to have a tiny bit more damage from your Beast Trap. And if you kill something, you generate Ultimate, that's very important. Plus, this one, your Beast Trap would deal more damage to Undead, Daedra, or Werewolves. So, if the Beast Trap requires these passives. Not the last one, that's for Cyrodiil. Mage's Guild, this is where it gets important. Reduces the Magicka and health cost of your Mage's Guild abilities by 15%. It's very important. We're running 3 abilities and 2 which we actively use on the front bar, so you definitely want to get that. Increases the duration by 20%. That's also very important. That's how we get them all up to 14 seconds. Otherwise they would last a little bit less, and that would screw up the rotation. Magicka Controller increases your Magicka recovery for each ability slotted. That's why we got 6% more mag recovery on the front bar for using all of these abilities. And then Might of the Guild, casting 1 grants you Empower, increasing the damage of your next light attack for 5 seconds. That's also very nice, just a tiny damage buff, but we are using these abilities, so you definitely want to get all these passives here. Psijic Order, I've opted not to go with Psijic Order really. I guess if you wanted to, you could use Accelerate and morph it to Channeled Acceleration and use it instead of Beast Trap. However, leveling up that whole skill line just for that one skill, which doesn't even do damage and is hard to keep up in certain situations, especially on the target dummy, it's not really worth it. So I've opted to go without any Psijic Order skills here. However, Undaunted, you definitely want all of these. This one increases the stuff you get back from synergies that you take, the resources. and this one increases your max health, stamina, magicka by 6%. So definitely make sure that you get Undaunted up to at least level 9 and get all these passives. Obviously you want all of your racial passives. I'm a dark elf on this build. You can be a high elf. High elves will do a little bit more damage, but dark elves are a close second. So since this is my first ever character, I didn't really want to race or name change it or anything. Got memories attached to it. That's why I just wanted to stay a dark elf. It also gets the spell damage increase of 250, plus it gets max magicka of 1800. That's why it's a close second to the high elf, which would be the #1 race for this build. And then what's very important is the alchemy one, medicinal use, makes your potions last longer, so that they actually last long enough to have them active at all times. As you can see here, the potion runs for 47 seconds now with a 45 seconds cooldown. That means you can always have a new one up and use them at all times. Just have the buffs active at all times is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so I hope you understand the passives. Now we're getting into the gear I'm using on this build, and the main thing we have on this build is going to be Zen's Redress. This drops from Lair of Marsilok, I think it is. It gives you magicka recovery, spell damage, max magicka, so all around nice flat stats. Plus your light attacks apply the touch of Zen to an enemy for 20 seconds, and enemies hit with the touch of Zen take an additional 1% more damage for each damage over time effect you've placed on them, up to 5%. And this is the reason why we're running all these damage over time effects. Pretty much. This is a bit difficult to explain, but I'm trying to make this happen for a second. Our light attack like this, okay, we've crit now, and it's burning, which is already the first status effect that's on it. Okay, 3,300, so 3,300 about is our light attack damage with the target just burning, which is already the first effect, or without it. It's a bit laggy now. So then we put a single target dot on the target. Let's use degeneration and then use a light attack, and it goes up to something around 4,000. Now we've got degeneration running. We've put Scalding Rune down and degeneration, do a light attack, and it goes up to 4,300. Then we can put the Beast Trap down, degeneration, and Scalding Rune, do a light attack, and the damage goes up to something around 6,000. So this is about how Zen's Redress works. That's why you need all these single target dots. Actual area of effect abilities like Elemental Blockade will not count towards it. However, on our bar, we have Degeneration, which will count towards it, Burning Embers, which will count towards it, Scalding Rune, which will count towards it, Engulfing Flames, and Barbed Trap. So that's where we get our 5 dots from, plus the actual burning status effect if you hit an enemy and you set him on fire, which can happen by either light attack, as you can see here, or just by our random Burning Embers skill that will always set it on fire, is another one that will count towards Zen. So that's how we are covered in terms of using that set. Now let's just read it again. The touch of Zens to an enemy for 20 seconds. Enemy with the touch of Zen take an additional 1% more damage from each damage over time effect you've placed on them, up to 5%. So this will just buff the whole group's damage. It's a bit weird how they worded the set here, but the point of this build is actually to run a nice rotation with weaving, put your light attacks in place, and keep all these dots up on the enemies, all these negative effects, like burning, or degeneration, or Scalding Rune, and then have the whole group do more damage to the enemy that has the touch of Zens on them. Okay, it's a bit laggy right now, as you might have seen here. I hope I'm not gonna DC or anything during the video recording. That would suck. So let's quickly get on with the rest of the gear that I'm running here. What we're running for a monster set is Zans. This gives us extra spell crit, and it's that fire breath beam that can occur every 18 seconds, dealing flame damage to it. You've probably seen that before. Let's see if we can get it to proc here. Oh boy, the lag is getting real. There it is. That fire beam, that's Zans. However, if you go too far away, you'll lose it. So you gotta make sure that you are within, where does it say it? 8 meters range of the target. Otherwise you lose the damage. However, since we use Molten Whip as a spammable anyway, we're close combat, so shouldn't have a problem with that. If you can't use Zans because you haven't completed that scale collar yet, you can also use Grostar from Waltz of Madness. This will do about the same thing. To all enemies within 8 meters of you, it'll be an area of effect flame circle that'll do quite a lot of flame damage in area of effect abilities. It's very nice for dungeons and trash mobs and everything. However, Zans for trials would be the preferred choice. Now what you can see here is I've got a health glyph on it, because that's how I get around 16.3k health. We've got a little more now because we're standing with the big raid dummy, and it'll give us an extra buff. And this is preference, really. You can put a Magicka glyph on here if you know that your tank is going to run Ebon, and you'll be fine with around 16k health or 16.5k health. However, just for safety, and because I'm not having sustained problems, I put a health glyph on this. I run this build a lot in veteran dungeons as well, and you're never sure what you're going to end up with, so it's nice to have a bit more for yourself. If you are in a perfectly set up trials group though, you know that someone's going to run Ebon, you know that there's going to be a warden healer or something that can buff your health a little bit, you can just run a Magicka glyph on here and be fine like that as well. You want everything in divines, Sans and Zens, and everything with a Magicka glyph, except for maybe your head with a health glyph if you choose to go that way. And then the last set we're using in this setup is Burning Spellweave. This drops from City of Ash, gives you max Magicka, spell damage, spell critical, and when you deal damage with a flame ability, you have a 15% chance to apply the burning status effect to the enemy and increase your spell damage by 500 for 8 seconds. This can occur every 12 seconds. So we have a whole lot of flame damage abilities, and we do apply the burning status effect regularly, which is why we're running this set to up our spell damage a little bit as well. And then that's what I said before when I was talking about Engulfing Flames, where you have that 8% value right now, or 7%ish. If Burning Spellweave procs, that will make it go up then, and make the enemy take more damage from all flame damage abilities. And this is also where the whole group utilization comes in. We've got Zens to buff the damage. We're running Engulfing Flames to buff the whole flame damage that the group does. And that's why the build works the way it works. You want the Staff in Precise with a flame damage glyph. You want the Jewelry in Bloodthirsty with spell damage glyphs. And then on the back bar, you want the Maelstrom's Inferno Stuff and Infused with a Berserker glyph, increasing your weapon and spell damage again for another 400 for 5 seconds. And that will keep on ticking due to your Wall of Elements. So every tick will sort of renew the glyph to have a really good uptime on it. Actually, no, I'm not going to say that now, because next patch you can get this weapon from normal Maelstrom Arena, and everybody should be able to clear that, so just go and get it then. If you don't have it yet, just put anything like a Willpower stuff and Infused with the same glyph in the back bar. But next patch, Those will drop from normal Maelstrom Arena, so no one should have problems really farming this one. What it also does is increases your light and heavy attacks to enemies inside of your Wall of Elements. That's also very nice. You can see if the thing is inside the Wall of Elements, my light and heavy attacks are increased furthermore. And there's Sans again. Let's break it. Okay, so much for that. Now let's get into the rotation. I've made this very, very simple. It's completely static and it works fine the way it is. What you do, if I stop lagging now at some point, is on the back bar, Engulfing Flames, Barbed Trap, Flames of Oblivion, and Blockade. Then you swap bars, and on your front bar, you are starting with Searing Strike. What's the morph called again? Fuck's sake. Burning Embers. You're starting on the front bar with Burning Embers. You do your one backflip whip. Then you do 4 more whips. 2, 3, 4. Degeneration. Scalding Rune. Swap bars. And that's it. That's how you go with it all the way through. There are optimized rotations. You could even put Engulfing Flames on the front bar and run Eruption with it. But I wanted to make this as simple as possible and still be able to hit up to right around the 70k mark on the 21mm dummy. So it doesn't really get much simpler than this. It's completely static. You don't need to rotate skills or alternate skills or anything. It works just fine the way it is, and you can do a whole lot of damage with it on your own, plus buff the whole group's damage as well. So again, Engulfing Flames, Barbed Trap, Flames of Oblivion, Elemental Blockade, Bar Swap, Burning Embers, Backflip Whip, 4 more whips, Degeneration, and Scalding Rune. And that's it. Obviously you want to have a light attack in between each of them. Since it's so laggy right now, I'm not sure if I can actually show you a very fast walkthrough. One thing that's important is the backflip whip. You need to be somewhat quick with your rotation, because your 3 stacks of Seething Fury will be 1 Engulfing Flames, 2 Flames of Oblivion, 3 Burning Embers, and then you're ready for the backflip whip. If you take too long with that, and you let the Seething Fury stack run out because you don't really know what you're doing, and you get to your front bar, you won't do the backflip. So it has to be somewhat fluently to have like first Seething Fury, second, third, and backflip. Then 4 more, and then your 2 dots, Degen, Scalding Rune, and you swap to your back bar and do the same thing again. As I said before, your ultimate, you always want to use it after you've put your dots down. So at the end of your back bar rotation, now everything's down. Ultimate, front bar, Burning Embers, backflip whip, 4 more, Degen, Scalding, swap. Engulfing, trap, Embers, backflip, 4 more, Degeneration, Scalding Rune, swap. Engulfing Flames, Barbed Trap, Flames of Oblivion, Blockade, swap. Burning Embers, backflip, 4 more, Degen, Scalding Rune, swap. And that's how you go about it over and over again. That will make sure that your stacks of Zen's Touch are always up, that your dots don't run out, and that you've got decent damage on your own while buffing the whole group's damage with Engulfing Flames and Touches Zens. Now, optional gear, first of all. There is one version that you can actually do, believe it or not. You can put... where the heck did I put that stuff? You can, on the front bar stuff and the jewelry, actually put Martial Knowledge. I know a lot of healers wear it, but it works on this set as well, and it doesn't make your damage go down too much, really. You might lose a couple K on your own, but you'll bring another nice buff to the group which is while your stamina is below 50%, your light attacks cause the enemy to take 8% additional damage for 5 seconds. So all the light attack damage will be increased by 8%. However, this is getting a bit rough, because if you're choosing to use Zens, you gotta make sure that your stamina is under 50%. So before you go into the battle, you gotta spam your Beast Trap a couple times. And then go about your rotation the normal way. 1, 2, 3, 4. Regen, Rune. And just make sure that you're that you've always got enough stamina to cast the Beast Trap, but that you never run out of stamina, or never let it be over 50% like it is now. So cast the Beast Trap. What you can do if you're getting too much stamina back is just bash the target a couple times, or the boss, and then you get underneath that percentage mark again. But then when you take in synergies and all. So it is possible to run Martial Knowledge on this build as well. So the healers don't have to run it. It will lower your single target damage a little bit, but you'll give another nice buff to the group. If you do that though, you have to watch out to always be under 40% stamina, and maybe bash the boss a little bit if it gets too high, but always make sure that you have enough to cast your Beast Trap. Okay, so much for the group support versions of the build. Now, obviously, Sororia instead of Burning Spellweave is an option. However, Sororia makes a circle on the ground. It would give you Minor Slayer, which we don't have on the build, so it'll up your damage a little bit even more. And the spell damage bonus would also generally be a little bit bigger than the one you get from Burning Spellweave. But Sororia puts a circle on the ground that you have to stand inside, or at least go back in every once and then and cast magic abilities and light attack to keep the buff active. So I'm not going to show all that now. If you want to run Sororia, you probably know how it works. Yes, you can run it instead of Burning Spellweave. Burning Spellweave I think is nicer because it doesn't require you to always watch out for that circle and go back inside of it and go back out of it. And the actual increase of spell damage isn't heaps higher. On the dummy it's noticeable because you're just standing in front of it and you're not moving, but in actual content I found Burning Spellweave to work just as well, really. So Sororia is a nice option on the front bar. If you don't want to go down that route of group support with Zens, you can use False Gods for Minor Slayer, spell critical, and reducing the cost of all your magic abilities. That would probably be my first go-to set. It's one of the strongest DPS sets right now. However, then you won't really have to bother with all the dots so much. You could put Eruption on the back bar and alternate that and Beast Trap, because they're both 18 seconds about. So your back bar rotation would be in the first one, Eruption, Flames of Oblivion, Blockade, and then when you get back to your back bar, Beast Trap, Flames of Oblivion, and Blockade. However, there are a bunch of really nice things out there like that. So if you want to do the single target thing, just Google Skinny Cheeks Magicka Dragonknight rotations. He's got a couple different versions for this patch, with Elfbane, without Elfbane, or even Zynode's Magicka DK, which is also very nice, especially for sustain with the whip that is the unrelenting grip that is utilizing. So there's two options for you to check out. I hope if you go down that route, my video was still somewhat helpful, because I explained the passives and how the skills work and how Seething Fury works and everything. So with this, I'll leave you. We'll quickly check the champion points as the last thing we'll do. This is just the usual setup: 72 Ironclad, 16 Spell Shield, 56 in Elemental Defender and Hardy, 51 in Thick Skinned, 19 in Quick Recovery, 44 into Warlord for Break Free Cost, 75 in Arcanist and Tenacity, 20 in Shadow Ward, and 56 into Tumbling, 61 Elfborn for critical damage, 49 Elemental Expert for flame damage, 10 spell erosion for spell penetration, 14 in staff expert, 61 in master of arms for direct damage, 72 in thaumaturge, because this is a dot build. We've got a lot of damage over time abilities, so we want to boost them up very high, 23% in that. And then 3 into piercing, which will help the beast trap a tiny bit. I've actually seen that in the Skinny Cheeks videos. Actually quite a good idea, because a lot of people always put 75 in here to reach the exploiter passive, which we want because our molten whip can set enemies off balance, and then we do 10% more damage against them. However, 75 in here doesn't get you over 23% either, so might as well put them in here for the increased physical penetration. That was a pretty good idea. Surprised nobody thought of that before. It probably doesn't make a big noticeable difference, but it makes a tiny difference, so why not use it? Alright, so much for that. That's my Magicka DK dot build, utilizing Zens and at times even martial knowledge if the healer doesn't want to run it, while still being able to put out quite a decent amount of damage on my own. Enough for most trials and situations anyway. Sometimes you just gotta take a step back to buff the whole group's damage. It's very nice, especially in veteran content. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope if you're already a Mag DK, this might give you a second option to go with things. Even if you're usually a single target Mag DK, it's nice to farm these sets, Martial Knowledge, Zen, Burning Spell Reef, and just try it out and utilize a couple different skills. Maybe it'll spice up your playing a little bit. Okay, see you next time. Hope that was good, and enjoy.